Thank you for joining our webinar today regarding leveraging workplace data in your strategic and tactical plans. In today's session, we're going to cover how to leverage insights from your workplace data in your workplace strategy, how to combine occupancy and space booking data to inform your contact tracing protocols, as well as using them for the reason they were designed for in their intent, how to leverage utilisation data to manage day-to-day building operations, and whilst also looking at air quality data to monitor the safe environment for employees to return to. I'm Lucy Fox and I work at OpenSensors. I'm going to start by talking about all the elements that are required when bringing change or returning into the workplace. We're talking very much around technology today, but there's also a whole bunch of other factors that help enable change, give business continuity, and also how to leverage workplace data in order to be efficient. And it's not just technology. It's also the work, the type of work and the working environment, different types of space, but also people and behaviour and how those interact with the different elements. As we rolled out of the first lockdown period from COVID, we noticed the phases of returning to the office. Now, we had a bit of a sense of this as we were in Europe and therefore opened up over the summer months. Phase one were typically the employees that could not work from home. Their job dependency meant that they had to be in the office. So for an essential maintenance or security, but also there could be some secure documents that were needing to be accessed, which couldn't be accessed via external sources. It was okay to manage these. There were way less than 5% of the people in the office. And let's face it, we had the space as everyone was working from home. So it was minimal complexity. Here's a desk, it's your assigned desk. When you go into the office, that is your space. Social distance measures were very quickly put in place. One-way systems were appropriate and hand sanitizers were around there with constant reminders that we were in a state of pandemic. Phase two, similarly with those people that were struggling to work from home. Now, it could have been technical issues, struggling with Wi-Fi or unable to access certain files or certain elements, or it was becoming very slow and cumbersome. But on top of that, there was also the home working challenges. Those may be in house shares or those with young families that were struggling to be able to work from home at all times. Again, minimal complexities really, because it was still a very small amount of people coming into the office. And again, there was still plenty of space. Again, the same rules apply as for phase one. You have a fixed desk area, there's social distance measures in place. It is your desk when you go in. Therefore, it could be managed very, very easily. What we noticed across Europe especially is as we rolled into the summer months, we rolled into this phase three. Now, phase three was the phase where I can work from home. I do have a working environment to be able to work from home. I'm saying that for my own personal well-being, I choose not to want to do that all the time. And therefore, I would like that flexibility to be able to come in. Can I have some space? Now, interestingly, that only flexed up a little bit more. It was still way lower than 10%. However, the complexities of being able to manage that quickly spiraled and it became a huge administrative burden. If you think about it, there was the line of business that had to approve or enable an employee to attend into the office. There was also impact from HR, definitely around the tracking and tracing element as well. And then those that were managing the workplace. Was there a suitable space? How could that be rotated when it was only used infrequently? And how would that work? So typically, an element of being able to book a space, albeit by a manual approach, and also how to trace. Again, typically very manual and cumbersome, making sure that multiple systems were in place in order to manage who had been in the office and when, should the contact tracing protocols need to be put in place. And all of that as well, there was the impact on the air quality. I'll cover that a bit later, but as occupancy changes, so does the air quality. When I was looking for the return to the office, this is a picture of how the sort of static, these are the phase one and phase two. So there's a static desk that was supplied. Now at the top, you'll see where we talk about mobile, semi-mobile, semi-fixed and fixed. This is very much for business as usual processes with regards to understanding the mobility profiles of that space. How is that space used? And we cover that a little bit later on how we can see the world moving forward. So when you were looking at fixed space for return to the office, your phase 1 and your phase 2 employees, it was easy to pick out those spaces, or relatively easy if you had the space. There's social distancing measures there. And as much as there was a huge logistical burden to get all of this in place, once it was in place, it was very static. So as you can see, these are the fixed spaces. This is where people can sit. The 2-metre distance rules adhered to. If we then look at rolling in some of the phase 3s, if we look at the bottom, there would be free space that could rotate and allow people to come into the office. One thing to be mindful of is that when we came out of the first lockdown and in Europe we started to go back into the office, there was a fair number of those phase 3s that wanted to come back into the office on a rotation. As Europe's progressed into more lockdowns and also through winter months, survey data is telling us that there is a higher demand for people that want to come back to the office on that rotation basis after Christmas time and as we phase through Q1. Reason being, when it was temporary, it was bearable. It's now not feeling so temporary anymore. So that need for having to have that rotation and that need to have a space to work, and also what could be dealt with before, is becoming more challenging now we're looking at it from the long term. And that's something to plan for and to prepare for in the future. People often say we don't know what the future looks like. This is a typical picture of how the world looked pre-COVID. So this is a typical area, that multiple different departments, an area looking at utilisation across the space. What we would typically see is Monday to Thursday would have averages ranging between sort of 35 and 50%, with some high peaks in there throughout the weeks, which would go up to 80% or even 100% utilisation throughout that time. But typically Fridays were very, very quiet. Typically Fridays, the average utilisation was way below 20%. Therefore, you could see that dynamic. I'll caveat that if you work in an environment where you have consultants. Consultants would typically be very heavily in the office on a Friday, but Monday to Thursday would be out at customer sites. So it's a slightly different demographic on that. But for here, this is what you would see for a typical environment when you're thinking of multiple different departments in an environment. When you look at what we know now, we have survey data of which 90% of people have said they want to work remotely. They envisage going into the office 1-2 days a week. 40% need to interact and socialise with colleagues. And that's therefore they see that office environment as being able to be that place where they can have that collaboration and social interaction. 19% are more productive in the office. I would suggest that depends very much on the task. I'm a lot more productive when I'm in an office environment if I want to do collaboration, if I want to get activities from multiple different sources and multiple different people. If I wanted to do a task where it's a high concentrated task, I might actually choose to do that from home, where I'd feel I'd be more productive and more effective that way. When looking at some of the other data of what types of spaces is important to employees, planned meeting areas is very high, so 74% of that. And that's understandable. People see themselves going back to the office for a formal meeting or for a meeting environment. There's also a lot of lessons we've learned from COVID working from home, is that how often did we have half of the team in a meeting and the other half dialing in, and yet those that were present were a lot more dynamic and involved in that meeting, whereas those dialing in had very little presence and involvement. How do we change that when we move forward? When we think about these types of meetings, do we want to plan about how we'd want to run that? i.e., would you want to have everybody in the room, or would you want to have everybody dial in? Or if you are going to mix it, how are you going to keep that engagement and participation throughout the meeting? 70% talked about the telephone conversations that were important to them. We all know how difficult and challenging that can be in an open plan environment. This is what came about with the phone booths and how to bring those into the workplace environment. We know that telephone conversations are going to happen. They're going to be part of a daily activity. How is that managed, and what's the right space or the right place to be able to do those? Informal and unplanned meetings, there are times when you want to have a conversation that can't be overheard, where you want to step somewhere where you need to do that. And also collaboration areas. I think it's fair to say collaboration areas is now going to have a high focus of what does that mean? What type of space is that collaboration area? Does it involve a whiteboard? Does it involve technology? Or does it involve a breakout space where it can be informal or of a more formal space? And understanding how all those need to be utilised is going to be hugely important. We know that going back to the office, and we know from survey data, there are some that are going to need to be 100% office presence. We know that already. We know that's a criteria for a certain group of individuals. We also know there are some that we're going to go for 100% home working. The majority will fall in combined, working in the office and in the home. And there is going to be a time when all of these merge together and it will all be in the office or in the building environment at the same time. Now, everybody who's pre-COVID was at a different stage of their ABW, or maybe some hadn't even considered it. Some were very far down the road on activity-based working, had already started thinking around desk sharing and how collaboration space was required. Others were far more traditional, very much on a one-to-one desk ratio. Either way, there is still a journey of how we're going to move forward and how we're going to blend all those different working styles together. When we look at all that data and we look at what we know from survey data and how we know people want to operate moving forward, we can kind of see how the office future is going to look. If people are going to come into the office 2, maybe 3 days a week, or even 1 day a week, maybe they won't come in on a Monday or a Friday. Maybe the days they will pick will be a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. If you're looking at social interactions, maybe Thursday may be a great day, because actually if you're in the city, you can do more afterwards and you could arrange more of a social gathering. You can see that kind of behaviour, and I can see how that would evolve into the office environment. When you think of how a neighbourhood or a team environment may look, now this is a picture of how a dynamic would look with mobility profiles. You will have a section, and this is rolling things very forward. This is beyond return to the office phase. This is now moving much more towards our new business as usual. And it's how the world's going to change over the next 12 to 18 months. We will have a section of people that will be fixed in the desk. They will have their space, and that's where they will sit. We will have those that semi-fixed, that they're frequently away, but they are throughout that space periodically over their working week. We will have people that are literally coming in to do other tasks and dropping into these areas to do certain tasks throughout that day. So it's almost like a touch point zone to go back and forward to should they need to. Now, some are choosing to keep in neighbourhoods or teams, and then you can really start to understand how much space those neighbourhoods require over time. You can also start to forecast and see what impact that will be as the department grows in headcount or shrinks in headcount over time. But you can also look at things, if this was a hotelling space, if this was a drop-in point, how would that space be utilised? Is it the right amount of space? Is it the correct amount of space for what people are looking to do? And it doesn't stop at desks. When you're looking at meeting rooms, one of the key challenges is understanding the utilisation of meeting rooms. It's always been a challenge of wrong sizing meeting rooms, or the misuse, if you like, of meeting rooms, of more people crammed into one meeting room, or a meeting room for 4 people constantly used by one person and their laptop to do a call. Understanding how those rooms are used and ensuring the right behaviour behind the right room choice is going to be really critical for space moving forward, especially if you are really changing your design and changing how people are using the office. And if people have already said they're only going to be coming back to the office for certain tasks, this is where all this information is going to become a lot more critical. So understanding what that room capacity is, and then also understanding how frequently it's used and by how many people, you could then start to understand how that space is really, truly utilised. And with here, when you look at our recommendation engine, to start giving some insights, for example, you have 4 rooms for 4 people. Actually, you ought to be looking at 5 rooms for 4 people based on how everything is being utilised. I talked about collaboration space. We know that when people come to the office, they've already said that it's for a social interaction, but it's also for collaboration. So these kinds of spaces are going to become a lot more requirement. And again, break those out, understand how the different types of spaces is being used, what's the most popular, which ones are underutilised and not needed. Could that space be used better to provide a better environment for the employees to work in? I've talked a lot about the occupancy side and understanding the utilisation of data, but there's also the management of space as well. Social distancing has brought in being able to really ensure that you can book a space and know that that space is secure. You can only book a space that's available because it's safe, and you can only book a space that's available because it is available. It needs to be an operation system that's ease of navigation, easy to book, and easy to identify space that's available. But what is also important is to be able to understand whether the space has been utilised. We all know the challenges over the years of meeting rooms, block booking or booking and no showing, somebody seeing an empty room and taking it even though it's technically booked by somebody else. If this isn't managed, putting those same behaviours into desks is going to cause problems and going to cause frustration for employees. You wouldn't want people travelling into an environment and then not being able to find a workable space or know that a space is available to be able to use at some point. Also, thinking about it from an employee's perspective, navigating a space is going to become increasingly more important. If you don't visit the area as frequently, how do you know where to go? Especially if maybe you don't go to that office at all very regularly, you're going to need to know where the zones are, where you need to go, where your neighbourhood is, where your team is, and find space accordingly. And if you're not choosing to do booking and allowing people to come and go freely, you also want them to have the opportunity to be able to see what space is available in as close to real time as is possible. So having a space that you can identify where you can go, see what space is available, and be able to utilise that. We know that 69% of people are investigating space usage analytics, which is great to see. I think when we've been in business for many years, and one of the key things that we've been going through and discussing has been around occupancy, and that was very clear because occupancy was the key driver. Is there enough space? We're getting very cramped. Do we need to get more space? It's expensive. It's fair to say that's less of an issue now, but the same technology provides a different answer for you now, because it's not about occupancy, it's about utilisation. How is my space being utilised? Is it fit for purpose? Is it providing what it should be providing for this environment? 55% are investing in contact tracing apps. Now, many countries have been doing the same thing to varying degrees of success. But actually, you can use what you already have in place in order to be able to help provide that answer as well. If you have booking, and booking is one element, and occupancy, so you can understand booking versus occupancy, which has been the key challenges in life to be able to understand that. Combining those together can also assist in contact tracing. If you know where somebody has been booked, you know that seat has been taken, you can therefore be able to do a report to run out to see who might be impacted should an individual say, I have tested positive or I'm in isolation. You can then put forward your isolation protocols that you would do in a far quicker way. 59% are investing in air quality monitoring. This is great to hear because from my perspective as an employee and as somebody who would be in an office, kind of things I only really noticed was I too hot or was I too cold? Occasionally in a meeting room, I may have noticed that it was a bit stuffy, or by the end of a day in a certain area of the building, it was feeling a bit tired, but I hadn't really put all that together. What we do know is that higher levels of occupancy with poorer ventilation will equal increased CO2 levels. And it will also equal recirculating the virus across the building. So therefore, being able to monitor the environmental factors, as well as aiding that against the occupancy levels increase, can enable you to circulate fresh air more frequently in order to prevent virus spread. I showed this slide near the beginning. I'll bring that back for you because I wanted to close off with this as well. Because we've talked a lot about technology, but as a reminder that it isn't just about technology, it is about how we work. It's about working practice. It is about space, how we use space, how we will use space in the future, and about the people and the behaviours and how we assist all those different areas. How we see the world today and how we have the return to office will change significantly over the next 12 to 18 months as we see and as we evolve in our business world. We wanted to put this on here to give an overview about how to consider and how to start planning to be able to bring that data together and start planning that towards your strategy. Gathering the data, quite frankly, is the easy bit. That for us is really the easy part. It's making sure that we plan it correctly. We work with you on how the deployment would be, and we work alongside your timescales and also your priorities to be able to do this. But I would definitely say start considering this early. There is a lot to consider. It's the communication. It's also about how, and it's also what you want to measure. We work with a number of organisations and happy to assist in any conversations should you need any assistance on that. So the key takeaways from that I really wanted to make sure we cover. This is a time to rethink the workplace. The purpose of the office will change. The working patterns and behaviours will change. So this is the time to really think about the purpose of the office. Utilising data to understand how the teams or how the departments are using the office, how the different types of spaces are being used across the whole building. And being able to share, if you have a large portfolio, to be able to go across your entire portfolio suite, to be able to see benchmark against different offices of how they're comparing and how the different regions are working in different environments and what learnings you can take from that. Always gathering employee feedback. The one thing we now know is we want the confidence to know that our office is safe and clean environment to come back to. But we're also going to want a place where we know that when we go there, it can support us in the tasks at hand. Finally, this is going to be a longer journey, and everything that comes out of this, we need to adapt and be agile and make sure that we are evolving our landscape as that changes and as we move that forward. With data, with gathering employee feedback, you can stay with that agility and be able to create a continuous adaptation of how your workplace needs to be as everything evolves. I'm Lucy Fox. Please do contact me should you have any questions, lucy@opensensors.com, or you can contact us through hello@opensensors.com. Thank you all for your time.